Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I am doing the reread or not to reread tag. This tag was created by Robert G., reader of books, and I was not tagged by anyone. But I did have Penny tell me she would really like to see me do this on my channel, and I love tags like this one that are just more conversational and chatty. So as you might be able to tell by the title, this tag is all about rereading. So make sure that you chime in the comments and let me know your thoughts on rereading and answer some of these questions as well. So the first question is, do you reread fiction? Why or why not? And yes, I definitely do. I actually would say the bulk of what I read is fiction. So when I'm rereading, a lot of it is going to be fiction. And I think that there are some types of books that I definitely don't reread that aren't the same upon a reread, but I do read a lot of classics, and I think classics lend themselves really well to rereading, and I think that there is more that you can glean each time. The next question is, do you reread nonfiction? Why or why not? And the answer to that is sometimes. It just depends. So there are some like spiritual nonfiction that I've read that have been really enriching to my life, and I want to go back and like re-glean from the pages things that I've read. So definitely reread spiritual nonfiction at times. Sometimes I don't. I find that when I read like historical nonfiction or memoirs, I haven't really tended to reread those, at least not yet. Question number 3, if you reread fiction, what kind of fiction are you most likely to choose? Bestsellers, classics, genre fiction, etc. What is your reason for the choices that you've made? So I already said that I tend to reread classics. I think classics that have stood the test of time tend to be a bit meatier, and as a result I think that there's more that you can glean, which I already said, but it does still have different like themes and characters that you can identify with that have stood the test of time. I don't ever reread usually mysteries or thrillers or anything that has like a big plot twist, because I already know the twist. And so it just doesn't have the same appeal to read it again. There are some that I've reread. I've reread some Agatha Christie's. It's fun to follow the breadcrumb trails and see like, oh, this was here all along. So that can be really fun, but I still tend to not really reread her works. I've reread them if I've reread them like with my husband's, like listening to an audiobook on a road trip or like reading them out loud to my daughter or something like that. But mysteries, I don't tend to reread over and over again. And I also don't tend to reread kind of like fluffy filler books that I read in between more difficult books. I don't tend to reread those either. I will reread genre fiction though, especially if it's like fantasy that I've really enjoyed. I will go back and reread that as well. But it has to have like some sort of like character that I just absolutely fell in love with, or themes that I find really interesting and identify with. Otherwise, it tends to be more of a forgettable book. So if it's a book that's forgettable, I'm not going to remember to go back and reread it, if that makes sense. So the next question is the same, but for nonfiction. If you've reread nonfiction, are you most likely to choose histories, biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, philosophy, science, technology, travelogues? What is your reason for the choices you've made? So I tend to reread spiritual nonfiction that I have found really helpful to me in previous years, that maybe it's been some time since I've read it, but it was deeply impactful for me, and I want to go revisit those things that were really helpful for me. It kind of is like a shot in the arm or a kick in the pants to help me kind of get back on the track that it's helped me with. I do really enjoy historical nonfiction, and I also really enjoy memoirs. I haven't really gone back and reread those. I think part of the reason for that is because I'm newer to those things. I've just started reading more nonfiction in my life the last couple of years, other than spiritual nonfiction. That's been a newer addition to my life. And so I haven't felt ready to reread any of them yet. I'm not adverse to rereading them. I think that there's a lot of value from that as well, especially because I think that I could easily forget some of the details over time. But there are some here that I definitely like. I don't read philosophy, I don't read science or technology. I haven't really read any travelogues, but I could see travelogues being something that I would really enjoy, especially if it has like beautiful nature writing and stuff. But yeah, I tend to reread because of like the memories I have of something, and then I hope to either kind of relive those memories or just like immerse myself in the themes or things that have built me up previously in my life and wanting to revisit that and re-experience that. Question number 5 is, if you have read a book which has been translated from another language, would you reread the same book in a newer or different translation? If it's a book that I enjoyed, I would absolutely reread it in a different translation, but I don't feel the need to do that. Like if a new translation that comes out saying like the best Dostoevsky translation ever, which I'm a huge Dostoevsky fan in case you didn't know, but if someone said that, I would be like, okay, like like we all have our preferences of what we enjoy when it comes to translations. And when we have translated classics, there's just a plethora that you can choose from. And I have people ask me all the time, like, what's the best translation for this book or that book? And my honest opinion is usually whatever translation works for you, whatever one that you find jives with the way that you read and makes it less of a hurdle to read that book. But I know that there's lots of translated books that are not classics that have, been written in the past, I don't know, like couple dozen years, whatever, couple decades, whatever. And so I would definitely reread some of those in a different translation, but I think they'd still have to be books that I enjoy, even if a new translation improves upon the book itself. If I didn't identify with the characters or enjoy the story or felt like I just didn't get it, I'm not going to want to reread that, even if it's a different translation. The next question is, how many times would you reread the same book? As many times as it takes. No, I'm just kidding. As many times as I want to. So my most reread book, other than the Bible, because I read that in its entirety a lot of times once a year, but sometimes not. It just kind of depends. That's the one I've reread the most. But the fiction that I've reread the most is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I've read that 13 times. So there are lots of books that I've reread many times, but Lord of the Rings is that high because I read it so many times during my teenage years. I read it annually from the time I was 12 until the time I was 24. And then I didn't read it again until last year. So then I went like a decade without reading it. So it just depends. But it's really hard for me to reread books now that I am an adult. I have a hard time rereading books the same amount of times that I did as a child. First of all, because my responsibilities have increased and I don't have as much reading time. But secondly, because my horizons have expanded and there are so many books coming out all the time, or even older books like backlisted or classic books that I've never heard of before that I'm really interested in reading. And so I have a harder time dedicating a lot of time to rereading because there's so many other books I want to get to too. So I would say that I don't like have a huge percentage of books that I reread every year. Like last year was a really high reread year for me where I think I had like 20 rereads or something like that. And that's unusually high for me. I don't anticipate this year being nearly as high. And the last question is, what is the most recent book that you have reread? So the only rereads I think I've had this year, other than I homeschool my daughter, so there are books that I will read with her, and I had a couple rereads for that. Like I reread Animal Farm, and I reread Esperanza Rising, and I reread Breaking Stalin's Nose. So those are the ones that I've reread with her this year. But other than that, I have been rereading the Anne of Green Gables series with my friend Stephanie, and that has been lovely and beautiful. And at the time of filming this, the last one that I finished was Anne of Avonlea, but Anne of the Island is coming up. So by the time this video goes up, maybe I will have started and finished that, but I don't know. The short answer is the Anne of Green Gables series. Well, that's it for this short little tag. It's really fun to chat about rereading. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. How frequently do you reread? What kind of books do you reread? Do you just reread books that are comforting to you, that you want to come back to over and over again? Do you reread books that have like depth and you want to get something different out of them every time? Do you mostly reread, or do you mostly read new books? Like, I think there's different people read differently. So I'm really, really interested to hear your thoughts. And if you have a booktube channel, consider yourself tagged because I would love to hear your rereading habits as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me. And I will see you again next time.